Firefighters give everything to their communities. At firehousefurniture.com, we make furniture worthy of that sacrifice. Durable, comfortable, built to last. firehousefurniture.com.
There are two things firefighters dislike: the way things are, and change.
Sometimes traditional ways clash with the need for change.
That's where we come in.
Slicing through the noise with insights that matter.
Welcome to Igniting the Shift Within.
Your launch pad to revolutionize the way you think and work
and lead.
Welcome to another episode of Igniting the Shift Within. I'm David Dachinger. Today we're speaking with Tonya Herbert. She's the owner of Thin Red Line Decon in Florida PPE Services. We're talking about firefighter health and wellness as it relates to decontamination. And at the end, Tonya will also share 3 tactical takeaways to enhance your health, performance, and leadership. So without further ado, Tonya, welcome to Igniting the Shift Within.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here.
We were just talking offline that I've kind of followed your career path into the fire service probably since close to the beginning, and I've seen quite a bit of growth, and you've definitely offered diversified products and services to the firefighting community. So what was your path into the fire service, and how did you get focused on Decon?
So back in about 2014, I was working for an architectural firm that specializes in the design of fire stations. And we were interviewing for a project, and the assistant chief who was in charge of the project asked us, how would you design the station to control contaminants from being brought back into the living quarters? And I got put in charge of researching why they were asking. And when I did a little bit deeper delve into it, I found out that they had had 2 members that had been diagnosed with cancer, and they were concerned that it was occupationally related. Mm-hmm. So that just kind of piqued my interest, and the architectural firm started working on the design strategies. We were one of the first in the country to do the hot, warm, cold zone or red, yellow, green design. And as we got into it and I was doing more research, I came across the Firefighter Cancer Support Network white paper that they had released that year. And at the end of the paper, it talked all about the risk that firefighters face, the enhanced risk of occupational cancer. But at the end of it, it gave, I think it was 13 things that you could do to mitigate your risk. And number 3 on the list was using wet naps or baby wipes. So I started passing out the study to fire chiefs that I had gotten to know across the country. You know, are you aware of this risk? Are you doing anything about it? Baby wipes seems like, low-hanging fruit. And one of the chiefs that we were working with on a project out in Texas said, yeah, we've tried baby wipes, but they suck. They're too small. They shred, they ball up, they leave, fuzzies on your 5 o'clock shadow. And my guys don't want to smell like a baby's butt when they're done. And so I thought, okay, well, there's got to be something else on the market. So I looked for other products, sent a few to him that I found. His department tried them out, didn't like any of them. So he came to me and said, why don't we make a wipe? And I said, I know nothing about making wipes. So I put him off for about 18 months. And this is going to sound a little weird, but I had a dream. And in the dream, I saw the word fire in real big red letters. I turned away from it and I saw the letters again. And a voice in the dream said, this is your essence. This is at your core. Why do you keep turning away from it? So I woke up and thought, okay, I'm going to figure out how to make a wipe. And I had the luck of my brother's father-in-law is an epidemiologist, and he had 3 biomedical firms, and I happened to have a conversation with him about it, and he guided me on the formula and how to develop the product. So I launched Responder Wipes in 2006, stayed with the architectural firm for a little while. In 2019, went full-time with Responder Wipes. And in 2020, I was working at the Orlando Fire Conference. Orlando is my backyard and one of my wipes customers. And one of their division chiefs said, hey, do you know anybody that would open a gear cleaning business here in Central Florida? We're really tired of shipping our gear off. And I had made enough contacts in the fire service at that point that I knew someone that could help me. So August 2020, I launched Florida PPE Services. We are a verified independent service provider providing cleaning, inspection, and repair and other maintenance for turnout gear. So since then, between having the background in fire station design, developing responder wipes, and subsequently responder wash, which is an activated charcoal shampoo body wash, I also found other decontamination products that I thought fit well. So I changed the name of Responder Wipes, the company, to Thin Red Line Decon, so that I could offer responder wipes, responder wash, and other decontamination products.
Yeah, it's like a holistic approach too. Like when you wrap in the fire station design and everything down to the actual products using to clean oneself after exposure, not only yourself but your gear. So, and I had the opportunity to hear you speak and make a presentation recently at the Florida Fire Chiefs Safety and Health Conference, and I have to say that everything you presented made me want to go back in time and speak to my younger self, my younger firefighter self, and say, hey, this gear is not just something you put on to go to calls. You need to look at it and respect it in a whole different way. So let's dive into some of that because there's so much to it. First, cancer has been, buzzword. We're all looking at it. We're all talking about it. But is there more now that we need to be concerned about in terms of exposure?
Yeah, absolutely. Research has started to suggest that there's a link between firefighting and other occupational illnesses, especially neurological diseases like Parkinson's disease and ALS. There's also some research that suggests a link between infertility issues and diseases with offspring. So probably about 3 years ago, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is a division of the World Health Organization, took a look at all of the research that was out there. They did a meta-analysis, and they ended up reclassifying the occupation of firefighting to a group 1 known carcinogen. So previously to that, it had been a group 2B, which is possible. Group 2A is probable, and then group 1 is known. When they looked at all of the data that was out there, it's not only exposures that allowed them to reclassify it, but it also included shift work, sleep deprivation, stress levels. All of that combined is really a synergistic effect. And they made the decision at that point to then reclassify firefighting as a known carcinogen. So that's really impacted how the states are looking at cancer, especially presumptive coverage. Every state now has some sort of presumptive coverage for cancer, as it relates to the occupation of firefighting. But what I want people to understand is there's so much that you can do. Just because you are a firefighter does not mean that you are going to develop cancer. It is much more complex and nuanced than that. It has to do with genes. It has to do with, what your department's protocols are. It has, like you said, shift work, sleep deprivation. It's all tied together. But what I've chosen to focus on is really decontamination and how that can help protect firefighters.
We're not going to be able to probably get to everything, but what you presented in your training was like a masterclass in not only cancer, but also the PFAS and everything we need to know about that, routes of exposure, and especially like how turnout gear actually functions. I have to say, I learned so much about how the gear actually protects us in ways that it doesn't protect us. So we'll get into that. But in general, when you made that presentation, what did you want the people in the audience, the fire chiefs, to take away? What was kind of like the most important takeaway from that?
So the buzzword, of course, over the last several years has been PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. It is a group of man-made compounds that some are carcinogenic, some are not. They're called forever chemicals because they take an extremely long time to break down. There's PFAS in turnout gear basically in 2 forms. One form is a coating on the fibers of the outer shell, basically a Teflon coating over each fiber that prevents hazardous fluids from being absorbed into the fibers. And then there's PTFE, which is on the moisture barrier. That allows water droplets to not penetrate the moisture barrier, but allows water vapor, such as sweat, to pass through on the other side. So there's a definitive benefit to the PFAS on the gear. However, there is concern that exposure to the PFAS is causing firefighter cancer. PFAS is definitely on the gear. They're 100% sure of that. What they haven't determined fully is how the PFAS is getting from the gear into the body of the firefighter. There's three major routes of exposure. There's inhalation, there's ingestion, and absorption. And they don't know yet which way the PFAS is getting into your body. So there's still a lot of research that needs to be done related to that. Mm-hmm. The concern that we're seeing is there's now basically three different levels of gear that are out in the fire service. You have legacy gear from about 2020 and earlier that has PFAS in all the layers, the outer shell and the moisture barrier. Mm-hmm. Starting at about 2020, the major mill manufacturers started doing away with the Teflon coating on the outer shell and instead used a silicone or a wax coating. So then you had gear that had a non-PFAS finish on the outer shell, but you still had PTFE in the moisture barrier. This year's really the first time, some PTFE-free moisture barriers were introduced a couple of years ago, but really now is the first time that you have multiple manufacturers offering fully non-PFAS gear. They say non-PFAS instead of PFAS-free because it was not intentionally added. Sometimes there can be, little particles that pop in every now and then, but it was not intentionally added. So non-PFAS gear. The problem is when you have three different types of gear out there, they all have different performance factors. And you could have a shift where you've got three different types of gear out there. All three are on personnel responding to the same fire, and the gear is going to perform differently. So while we do believe it's very important to get PFAS out of the gear, there is some significant concerns on what type of limitations there are now on the performance of the gear, and that personnel don't understand which kind they're actually wearing, how it will perform, and how they need to take care of it. So that was one of the biggest things that I wanted people to understand was they need to know what type of gear they have, how it's going to perform, and how they need to take care of it. With the wax and silicone coating on the outer shell now, it does not prevent the absorption of diesel fuel, hydraulic fluid, other types of hydrocarbon fluids like the old Teflon coating did. And so those fluids may wick and spread farther into the outer shell. And then the other thing that we're seeing from research out of North Carolina State University is then when that outer shell is exposed to a flame, it's catching on fire and it's staying on fire much longer than your legacy gear with the Teflon coating on the outer shell. Dr. Brian Orman presented at the same conference, and I think it was pretty shocking when people actually saw the difference in the performance of the gear.
Yeah, he had a lot of visuals to support that, and you were literally seeing side-by-side comparisons of the gear being exposed to diesel fuel and then being exposed to flame, and it was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, so people need to understand that they may have different performance factors, and there's so many things though that you may not be able to control whether your gear has PFAS in it or not. But you can control what you do and your behavior and whether you do preliminary exposure reduction and whether you wash your gear and whether you are getting physicals and, how if you're catching up on your sleep on your, off days. So that's the other thing that I wanted people to understand is, 97 to 99% of the population has detectable levels of PFAS in their bloodstream. Firefighters, civilians, everyone. It comes from multiple sources, drinking water, food that's either been grown or raised in contaminated water. But if you're drinking out of a Starbucks coffee cup, or you've eaten pizza out of a to-go box, or even flossed your teeth, PFAS is literally in everything in our environment now. So you could have non-PFAS gear, and the minute you walk into an IDLH environment where there was a couch with a, stain-resistant finish on it, and, clothing that was North Face and a DWR finish, you've now walked into an environment with PFAS particulates floating around in it, and your gear is no longer non-PFAS gear. And then what do you do? So that's kind of where my specialty has arisen, is in the decontamination protocol.
Yeah, it seems simple, right? All right, we'll just transition away from PFAS gear, but now it's not as simple as that, right? There's more exposure possibilities. So walk us through washing and decontaminating gear. I think we were trained to do it, but perhaps not thoroughly trained. So what are you seeing out there that you'd love people to know about, how they can do that better, be better at decontaminating the gear that they're wearing on the job?
So there's a couple components to that. Back in 2020, with the new 1851 standard, when they released that update, they included preliminary exposure reduction as part of their methodology in the cleaning. The newest edition, the 2026 edition, has come out. It's a consolidated standard now, so the new number is 1850, but within 1850 is still 1851. And they are much more specific about preliminary exposure reduction in that standard, but also in cleaning and inspecting your gear. Research years ago, probably 7, 8, 9 years ago, out from NIOSH, Dr. Kenny Fent, showed that doing on-scene preliminary exposure reduction eliminated PAHs up to 85%, depending on the type of preliminary exposure you did. That the best results were seen from doing some type of wet wash. So we know it works. Subsequently, the University of Arizona did a study with Glendale and Tucson fire departments, where they wanted to actually look at very specific mitigation techniques and to see what impact it had on the firefighters. So they used urinary biomarkers to test the levels of PAHs in the firefighters' bodies. So they would take a sample as they were coming on shift, after they had an exposure, and then at the end of their shift. And then they implemented mitigation strategies, including preliminary exposure reduction, showering within the hour, using a sauna, using full PPE, and measured the results and the delta, the change that they saw in PAH levels. What was interesting was one of the most significant reductions in the amount of PAHs came when they had the pump operator, the engineer, stay on air and be in full PPE while operating. And it kind of makes sense. You're typically not on air, typically not in full PPE, but you might be, within, downwind from the IDLH environment, still, breathing in particulates, but you're also exposed to the diesel fumes from the engine. So when they looked at all of that, there was a dramatic difference in just implementing that one mitigation strategy of them being on air. But they did see a drop in PAHs with all mitigation strategies. So from using wipes on scene, doing a preliminary wash down, and then showering within the hour. The one area where they did see a decrease, but they couldn't consider it statistically significant, was the use of saunas. And there's a little bit of, I won't say controversy, but concern around those. And I talked about this in the presentation. The researchers that I've talked to have explained to me that your kidneys are the method by which most of the toxins are eliminated from your body, through your waste and your urine. I think it was about 93 to 95% of it. Well, what's happening is if you come back from a fire and then you're jumping into a sauna to try and sweat out the toxins, you're not allowing your kidneys to do their function. You are putting your body back in an elevated heat state, and your kidneys do not function as well as when they're at their, baseline body temperature. So what the doctors that I've talked to have said is come back, take a cold shower, close your pores, because obviously the more your pores are open, the more you're absorbing. Close your pores, cool down, let your body get back to its normal baseline temperature. And then at a future point, use the sauna. So they do want to do some more studies around the saunas, but like I said, they showed across the board, all mitigation strategies work to reduce the PAHs in the body. So that's one thing. It's hard. A lot of people have a hard time changing habits in the fire service. You mentioned in the intro video that 2 things firefighters hate. Changing the way things are. So trying to implement a preliminary exposure reduction program has taken some time to get going, across the board. I had somebody tell me one time that, when they started, they were a paramedic and nobody used nitrile gloves. And now a generation later, you wouldn't be caught dead without them.
Right.
And I think it's going to take a generation, as new recruits are taught, this is how you do it. And older people retire, then I think you'll start to see it be more commonplace. But absolutely doing preliminary exposure reduction, we know it works. So the second biggest thing is taking care of your gear. There may be PFAS in your gear, but I promise you there's a whole lot of other stuff in there once you've gone into an IDLH environment. The standard requires that you do an advanced cleaning at least every 6 months, but also every time you have an exposure to products of combustion. That includes a dumpster fire, car fire, room and contents. It doesn't matter. If you smell smoke, you need to be washing your gear.
What is an advanced cleaning? What is
an advanced cleaning? There's a very specific definition in 1850. It's a mechanical means where the extractor can be programmed. It's for a certain length of time with a certain number of rinse cycles at a certain temperature with a certain type of detergent. So if you can go through and check off, basically what it says in Chapter 6 of 1850, that counts as an advanced cleaning. Departments can do it themselves if they have their extractors programmed properly, or they can use an independent service provider like what Florida PPE Services is. They can even use a manufacturer. So if your gear needs to be repaired and you want to send it back to the manufacturer, they can do an advanced cleaning as well. But doing an advanced cleaning is absolutely critical because gear off gases. It continues to off gas, and you can also cross-contaminate. You take your dirty gear back into the cab, back into the living quarters, back into your POV, anything like that. You're now cross-contaminating all of those other environments. So making sure that you're cleaning the gear and inspecting it and making sure it's operating properly. It protects you from exposures. But if you've got holes, if your moisture barrier is not functioning properly because the seam tapes come off, your gear is not going to provide the level of protection that you think it is.
Right.
So you are required to do an advanced cleaning twice a year at a minimum, and one of those also includes an advanced inspection. So maintaining the gear is as critical, if not more, than doing your preliminary exposure reduction. But it all goes hand in hand. Every morning when you come on shift, you do a truck check. You're checking everything on the engine to make sure your tools are there and in working order. Why aren't you doing that with your gear? It's equipment too. And, so changing that mindset and getting people to understand and get away from the salty look. That salty look is killing you. And Unfortunately, 25% of retirees die within the first 5 years of retirement. You made it through your career and now you don't get to enjoy retirement.
Arguably, the turnout gear is our most important piece of gear that we should be checking. And this is my personal curiosity. So aside from the turnout gear and even the hood, we're also wearing a helmet that's got a liner in it. I think that probably is neglected in terms of decontamination. What are you seeing out there, and what are your recommendations for that part of the equipment?
So part of 1850 cleaning requires the advanced cleaning of the helmet as well, and that includes the soft goods. You heard me tell the story. In 2018, we received a very large order for wipes from a civilian email address. And when I dug into why somebody had ordered it and what they were going to do with $1,200 worth of wipes, I found out that somebody had done a fundraiser and they were donating their wipes to their hometown department in honor of their cousin that had died from occupational cancer. And it turned out to be Battalion Chief Josh Carney from Midway Fire Rescue in Pawleys Island, South Carolina. At age 41 in 2017, he was diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma. He had 3 spots right on the back of his head, right where his helmet sat. And he used to shave his head, so he thought they were ingrown hairs. Mm-hmm. And for 6 months, he didn't do anything about it. The spots didn't get worse, but they didn't get any better. Finally went to the dermatologist, who immediately sent him for a biopsy. And by the time it came back, he had stage 4 melanoma. And he died 4 months later at age 41. So I really stress to people, you have to clean your boots, you have to clean your helmet, you have to clean everything. All of it is contaminated. And think about it, your helmet's sitting right against your skin. Same with your boots. You've got your very thin skin of your soles of your feet. How often have you cleaned the inside of your boots, David?
Right. I don't think I ever did. And gloves too. Like a glove's another thing that we may not think of as needing to decontaminate on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. But the gloves, again, are right against your skin.
Yeah.
And a lot of people throw gloves in the extractor. That's not permissible under the standard, because you're taking all the contaminants that are on the outside of the glove and flushing them up onto the inside of the glove. So there's very specific procedures for how to clean gloves, boots, helmets, everything. And it is all an ensemble. All of it is meant to protect you, but all of it can make you sick if you don't clean it and take care of it as well.
What are some of the products, besides you've mentioned a little bit, but what are some of the products and innovations that Thin Red Line Decon offers that you feel are game changers?
So in 2018, we had the opportunity to work with a group from Sweden, Healthy Firefighters. That's a protocol that they've had. Sweden's 15 years ahead of the United States on decontamination protocol. And their model treats soot basically like a bloodborne pathogen. They bag everything on scene. They have up to 3 sets of gear. They wash it after every exposure, but they bag tools, equipment, gear, everything on scene. And so from that protocol, they developed the DOT system, which is a series of encapsulation bags. And my 2 favorite ones are the DOT sealed and the DOT light. They both have TPU welded seams and a gas tight zipper. So whatever you put in that bag will not off gas. Unlike your red fire gear bag, which controls absolutely nothing.
Looks cool, but that's about it.
Right. So the DOT light and the DOT sealed bag, I think, are amazing pieces of equipment. We also carried the Storm Stick, which is an on-scene decon rinse system that was developed by a Phoenix firefighter. He basically took all of the excuses his crew had for why they weren't doing preliminary exposure reduction and made it so that they, could do this in 20 seconds, easy setup, single person could decontaminate themselves, and it was always available. So the Storm Stick Decon system is one of my favorites. We are working with someone to carry a new product now called Step 1, which is kind of like sunscreen. You spray it on and it provides a dermal barrier to prevent toxins from being absorbed into the skin. It's based on something that surgeons use, that a lotion that they would put on to prevent any type of pathogen from being absorbed into their skin. So I'm really excited about that product. We haven't really gotten it out there yet. But that's just some of the stuff. Anything related to decontamination. So wipes, the activated charcoal shampoo body wash, hose cleaner, anything like that. So.
Great. And I'll have you share in a minute where people can find that online. Okay. Before we do, so we like to share 3 tactical takeaways at the end. They're actionable items that firefighters can use to enhance their health, performance, and leadership. What do you have for us?
This is easy. Preliminary exposure reduction. Start with your on-scene decontamination. Again, you can remove up to 85% of the PAHs from that, and it's easy to do. Unfortunately, it has to be a top-down and a bottom-up approach. The chief's not going to be able to come in and tell you to do it. if you don't have your company officer on scene actually modeling the behavior. And I can guarantee you a rookie is not going to sit there and say, hey, give me some wipes, when the incident commander is not, modeling the same type of behavior. So absolutely doing preliminary exposure reduction, making sure your department has a policy for doing advanced cleaning and advanced inspections and repair on your gear. Maintaining your gear is critical. So make sure it's getting washed, no more dirty helmets, no more, looking cool with the soot. It's just not the way it is anymore. And then lastly, get your physical. And make sure your doctor knows that you're a firefighter. There's checklists out there that are basically, it's called your patient is a firefighter. And it's specifically so that doctors understand what additional risks that you face as a firefighter. But related to that is catch up on your sleep when you can. The whole shift work and sleep deprivation really has a lot to do with it. But again, I think if Josh had gone into the doctor and been checked a little bit sooner, maybe they could have found his melanoma in time to treat it better, treat it earlier. So make sure you're getting your physicals.
Yes, 100%. I think dermatology is one of those areas where there's probably more they can do if they catch things early, colonoscopies, and even dentists are doing more oral cancer exams now, which is critical. So, but I've never heard about that checklist. I think it's phenomenal. And I think that's great information. Tonya, where can people find you? Social media, website, anything else you want to share?
You can find me on thinredlinedecon.com. I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, and then Florida PPE Services also has its own website, floridappeservices.com. And there's social media for each of those channels as well. I love to do consultations with departments. I did a large project for the Oklahoma City Fire Department on their 1850 program, and teaching, speaking, and doing those types of consultations is really kind of my favorite part of it now. I mean, I love my businesses. I love Florida PPE Services, but helping to get the word out there, helping to educate, and helping to change the culture of the fire service is really, really important to me and what I love to do. So if anybody, I'm happy to always be a resource. I tell people, even if you don't buy my products or use our services, I'm still a resource. I can still answer questions. And if I don't know the answer, chances are I know somebody that does know the answer.
Well, thank you for all you do, and especially helping to prolong the wellness of first responders, firefighters, and into retirement, right? And that has a ripple effect to their families and loved ones in the department they work in. So what you're doing is critically important, and I really appreciate you for that.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Thanks for watching Igniting the Shift Within. Join us next time to hear more from the game changers shaping our profession. You can check out our website, podpage.com/igniting, and make sure to like and follow Firefighter Nation on their website, firefighternation.com. They're on YouTube, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Till the next time, stay safe, stay connected, keep igniting the shift within.
There are two things firefighters dislike: the way things are, and change.
Sometimes traditional ways clash with the need for change.
That's where we come in.
Slicing through the noise with insights that matter.
Welcome to Igniting the Shift Within.
Your launch pad to revolutionize the way you think and work
And lead.